in Japanese spirituality, in Japanese spiritual culture, the belief, I know it's kind of shocking, but the belief is not really important. It's basically the gratitude, because appreciation is the seed to happiness. You can find happiness from even a tiny thing if you find something that you can be thankful for.
So welcome, Hiroko.
Thank you so much.
We are sitting in a shrine in Kumano in the mountains of Japan. And I'm so happy to have you and welcome you to Wonderstruck to talk about the way in which spiritual traditions are embedded in Japanese culture. And you're a folklorist and a translator, and you've just published this beautiful book, 8 Million Ways to Happiness, which has been a pleasure for myself to read. And everybody on my team has just really loved your book. I mean, so many. You're welcome.
So my book is a mixture of my memoir and the Japanese culture,
Right.
and it's my the personal journey of re-engaging with Japanese spiritual traditions after my mother's passing.
Yes, it was just very beautiful to read, and there was so much in it that felt resonant. I mean, one thing, for example, about just Kumano and the way that it has, or how you describe this kind of radical inclusiveness, and that you could pray in any way, you know, that felt authentic or real.
Right.
You know, you
Right.
didn't have to necessarily, I mean, I do appreciate the bowing and the clapping. I think it's beautiful, but you could do the cross. And apparently you also talked about someone doing a flamenco dance in front of the shrine.
Yeah, that was very fascinating. So before I go into the deep conversation, I'd like to talk about the big picture. Yaoyorozu no kami.
Yes, 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 yes.
So it means 8 million spiritual beings in English. So in times of old, Japanese people thought that everything surrounding them had a spirit. The sun, the moon, rain, trees, rocks, I mean, everything. And so that 8 million here in this concept doesn't mean the exact number. It simply means infinite or many. So that concept, it's still pretty much active today. It doesn't necessarily mean that Japanese people believe that everything has spirit, but we feel the sense of it. So when you mentioned the radical inclusivity, that is one of the major characteristics of Japanese spirituality. Just because of the 8 million spiritual beings concept, it's active because that we have so many different just so many different types of kami here. Even the bad things like poverty, or plague, or eye diseases, or even toothaches. And it doesn't mean that, again, Japanese people venerate those bad things, but they do exist. And they're all equal in existence. Because no matter how you wish, you wish that those bad things don't exist or disappear, but they are there. We have to, it's a quiet reminder to deal with them.
You know, when you were speaking, it makes me think of like when you talk about how kami or spirits can be in anything, even a toothache, right? And then the first reaction is like, well, wait, how could that be happiness? But then I realize it's about what you just said. It's facing that. It's like, okay, there is the toothache. And as I accept it and face it, move with it, deal with it, I can then feel presence or happiness or a sense of harmony. So I really appreciate that, because I think there's a way in which globally, well, I can't speak for the globe. I can try to speak for the Americans, but we try to avoid, people like to avoid all those kinds of things that are not so pleasant, that are very real.
I agree. We live in such a difficult time right now. Another reason why I wanted to write this book in English, but not necessarily mean that the Japanese spiritual tradition is better than any other cultures. I'm not saying that. It's far from it. But I just wanted to bring different perspective. Because I spent almost a decade living in America. I wrote in the book, and I learned a lot. America really taught me a lot.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I learned, in America or in the West, the people, very flexible in society, but people tend to be very rigid in religion. And the Japanese are totally opposite. We are very rigid in society, but very flexible in spirituality. And it's a different perspective.
When you talk about like the way in which it's sort of less rigid, and the way in which this is like traditional, or I think about it like as when I was reading your book, we talk about it traditional or foundational. And then how it is Japanese, but how it almost feels very human, right? This foundational way of spirituality or presence being energetic or spiritual presence being present. Like I love how you talk about it. Kami can be, or spirit is in your words. It's in the piece of paper, my jacket, And I think it's there's a way that it feels like it's an enchantment. And, in the United States, when you talk about it, how that permeates this world and this culture, and how it does to some extent in certain places in the US, but that there is more of like, I'm this religion, you're that religion. On the one hand, we can chill and hang out, but if we're talking about being a Christian, it's like, it does feel like it's more structured or contained.
Yes.
So I think that's really powerful and profound, and that there's a way in which that it's so much to offer, to have that permeated, embedded sense of spirit, and how this spiritual but not religious movement, if you will, I don't want to, not like a political movement, but this way of being seems like it is coming more and more in the US. People are talking about it more. Right. And that's why I think your book has so much to offer people for sure in the US.
Yeah, I learned that even in America, in the West, even being atheist is a big deal. Big deal.
Yeah, it's like it's a religion.
Yes. Or changing, the changing from one faith to the other. That's another huge deal. There are 3 major belief systems in Japan: Shinto, and Buddhism, and Shugendo. And the boundaries of those belief systems are very blurred. It's easy for you to find the Shinto shrine and the Buddhist temple built side by side.
Is that what this is? That's what this, or
this one is different. I'll get to that.
Okay.
I get to that.
Okay.
That's one example. And another one is that you find Shinto shrine inside on the property of Buddhist temple. It's just very blurred. This place, and I think is this building, for example, they call it Shinto shrine, but I can feel there's a Buddhist icons here and there. I mean, I when I came here, I learned that the deity was removed, but there used to be a Buddhist deity was here.
Oh,
yes. So it's just like that.
Wow.
It's very it's very blurred, intertwined, and then the different type of spiritual beings peacefully coexist here. And also the boundaries between us, the lay people, and the spiritual belief systems are very blurred too. And yeah, so I'm not a religious person. But I go to shrines and temples a lot. It's that the reasons and why Japanese people are not religious, because that the term, the religion, shukyo in Japanese, it was only coined in 19th century. It was a new term. Japan had been closed borders for hundreds of years, and then America, came to Japan, Commodore Perry, and a lot of Western concepts came in, banking, the Constitution, eating of beef, and religion. So Japanese made a term shukyo, as a translation of religion. So the religion right there, it's Christianity. And then as we know, the Christian worldview is hierarchy, there's hierarchy, absolute God, the single God on the top, and based on faith, based on the belief, based on worship. Now, as I said before, worldview is just basically horizontal view, the worldview, the equal in existence, and there are also the toothaches and plagues and eye diseases and then so it's a totally different worldview. So that is why the survey after survey, when Westerners ask Japanese people, if you are religious, do you believe in religion? And automatically answer would be no. If I would say no to that too.
Yeah.
But if they ask, are you a spiritual person? Do you think spirituality is important in your daily life? And probably a lot of people would say yes.
A lot of people in Japan would say yes about that.
Yes, because I know you told me that this is the first time to visit Japan.
Yeah.
But I probably you noticed that the convenience stores are everywhere.
Oh yeah. Yes.
It's almost like,
yes. There's very good food at the convenience. It's true.
So if you come to Japan, you would know how ubiquitous they are. Mm-hmm. But the number of the shrines and temples is 3 times more than
I remember hearing
convenience
that.
stores. And most of them are open to public as long as people behave or show respect.
Yeah.
So that we are surrounded by the spirituality.
When you were growing up, would you have said, I am a spiritual person? Would your parents have said that? So it came kind of later in this process for you?
Yes, it's a lot later, because the spirituality, if you ask me, spirituality is a key to understanding of everything about Japan.
So it was around in your life.
Yes, so I didn't see it.
But it's so curious because I think of it like being embedded.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think like, when did it start? And then I think of your work with anime and folklore, like it must have started to percolate for you.
I have been always interested in Japanese, the tradition, history, and culture just because I am Japanese, but also the experience that I spent a year in America as an exchange student at the age of 17.
Yeah.
And that opened up my eyes.
Interesting.
Because till then, Japanese culture is just part of my, it's life, identity. And then I had never been questioned, of course, because I was surrounded by only Japanese kids, Japanese people.
Yeah.
So there's an orientation before all this the exchange students got sent to America. I was exchange student sponsored by the organization called YFU, mm-hmm. Youth for Understanding, and 50 or 60 kids they sent to America, I think.
That was brave to do that. That's a big deal.
Now I look back, I think it was just my parents were brave because I was
let you go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I still remember my parents, especially my father, was freaked out.
Yeah, of course.
And anyway, so there was an orientation, and for getting ready for spending a year in America. And the orientation coordinator gave us a lot of hints advises. And I don't remember anything except the sheet of paper. And then it says the typical questions Americans would ask. And then okay, there's a list. So there's the questions and also an answer. And then of course I don't remember any of it except one. So it's like which religion do you believe in? And then the answer was I'm a Buddhist.
That was the answer.
Everyone got quiet.
Oh, wow.
And I was shocked. And one parent raised their hand. And excuse me, I don't know if this is the right answer. And because, like me, for example, I go to Shinto shrine, and I go to temples and check them out, or I decorate Christmas tree, for fun.
Yeah.
Am I Christian? No. So everybody felt uncomfortable. But the orientation coordinator said, yes, I know. But America is a religious country. So it's easy. This is the easiest way, the easiest answer. And then so that really, so that journey was the very beginning. And then I just really rethinking and reflecting and
but it was your mom's passing that really started.
Yes, it was a massive blow when my mother passed away, and I couldn't do anything.
Were you surprised how it impacted you? Like,
Yes, I was shocked. I was shocked. That, of course, I was very sad about her, her death. Of course, of course. But also, I was shocked how much I identified myself with my mother. It was almost like reflection of a mirror. It was just because it's understandable because she gave me a life.
Yeah.
Her passing was just basically created a huge void.
Yeah.
And I couldn't do anything. And then, so I started walking.
Yeah, I like how you said that. You're like, I just put on my shoes and I walked to the park. Like something just got you out to do that.
Because that's the only thing I could do.
Yeah.
But first, I just went out and came back and cried. I just couldn't walk.
Yeah.
But every day, that changed. And then I started, walking a little bit longer. And then I started looking up, looking at front, started paying attention surrounding me. And then I found how kind the nature was. It was fall, and the colors just beautifully changes. Everything changed, and then also some tree lost all the leaves. It looked dead, but when I got closer, there were a lot of buds and waiting for the bloom in the spring, and that made me realize that the cycle of life. And then realized and taught me that yes, my mother passed away, but she gave me a life. It was like baton to take, and I should live the fullest. And then I realized after that, I was touched on the Japanese spirituality, because spiritual beings, kami, are avatars of nature.
Yeah.
They belong to nature. And then that was the deep dive.
That's such a beautiful story about the tree. How did that then take you to the study of the kami?
So I didn't know. I had no idea where to start. So I started reading Kojiki, the Chronicle of Japan.
Wow.
And it's a collection of myth and legends, the stories about the spiritual beings. Everybody knows, but a lot of people never read it. And then, so one is that it's very difficult to read, cryptic, basically. And then I started just basically the traveling and then visiting Shinto shrines and temples.
How did you find when you visited the shrines or these places, how did you find a way to pray that was like, felt real for you, or like, was it like a mantra, or what was your experience?
Yeah, so, okay, here's the thing. I know that other people, other Japanese who are bilingual, would agree with me, probably would agree with me that every time we say here, pray, it's off.
Okay.
It's off.
Interesting.
For us, because that it's in Japanese spirituality, in Japanese spiritual culture, the belief, I know it's kind of shocking, but the belief, it's not really important.
Yeah, no, I love that, actually.
Yeah, it's respect.
Yeah.
It's a respect. It's basically the gratitude. If you ask me, that is a core of Japanese spirituality. It's a gratitude for what you have, and the spiritual belief system, like Shinto, for example, is a tool to remind yourself, or to evoke, the appreciation, because appreciation is the seed to happiness.
Yeah.
You can find happiness from even a tiny thing if you find there's something that you can and thankful for. So when I always quote, for my book, I talked to a Shinto the shrine Shinto priest.
Yeah.
And I asked him what kami are, and he said that kami are a room, a space in your heart, and it is you who you fill a space, fill the blank. And he said he loves the concept of 8 million kami, the 8 million spiritual beings, because you can freely choose.
It's enlivening.
Yes, and then because when I look back, my mom, for example, my mother's passing. I mean, later I lost my father too.
Yeah.
And it was very, it really hit me. The pain, I'm going to take it to my grave.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I found the appreciation because they gave me life. So the hardship and basically negativity, death, and then positivities actually can coexist if you happen to find something even tiny you feel thankful for.
Yeah. That makes me think of like they fit in the space of your heart. Those two things can fit, and they're held in that way by your heart.
Yes.
And it makes me think of like going back to the thing of prayer, that it's more of like the sense of gratitude and respect. Because I had one of my questions that I wrote down was like, how is kuyo, or gratitude, right, transcendent? And you just answered it so beautifully.
Thank you. Yeah, so there's no clear division. There's no clear division. It's very blurred because it's all connected.
Yeah.
And then also I think the Japanese spirituality is really rooted on something that everyone can agree upon, which is gratitude.
And the space of the heart. It's fantastic. And the other thing I learned from you in reading your book too was, and what you just said about belief. And I was like, like belief, like, and you can, I don't want to, now I feel like I'm afraid to pronounce anything in Japanese.
No, it's okay.
Well, the half and half, like,
yes.
How do you say it?
Yeah, hanshin hangi.
Yeah, thank you. But it's like first I was like, well, what is that? That's like non-committal, but it's also like the way in which you could believe in something, right? It eradicates possibility.
Yes.
And I was like, oh, it was like this realization that makes so much sense. And then I have to like double down and believe it. And I get smaller and smaller. And I can believe in something by virtue of being grateful or
Right.
by having gratitude. And then it opens
Yes.
instead of closing it down.
Yes.
I was like, that's so cool.
Yes. Yeah, I'm so happy that that can give you that. My book provides different perspective, and it's free to take.
Yeah.
And then the concept of hanshin hangi, this half belief and half disbelief, it's kind of analog meter. you can just adjusting it because that a lot of stuff are not black and white, cannot be answered in black and white answers. So that concept gives you a third option. Just it's okay to have live in the gray zone.
Yeah.
When fact comes into play, that thing, that concept is just out of the window. It's a fact is a fact. But the question of spirituality, or maybe question of the Santa Claus.
Yeah.
It'd be nice that Santa Claus exists, kind of thing. It's just okay to be vague.
Yeah. Well, it keeps the mystery alive because it feels more real, ironically, in a way.
Yeah.
Right?
So you mentioned that you watched Totoro.
Yeah. Totoro and Spirited Away.
Right. Yeah. And Totoro, right? Totoro is it's another great example. Yes, Totoro is anime. But when the protagonist, the two girls are having a really hard time, Totoro came out from nowhere. In a dark place, and then the darkness in the nature. But so I know that's another thing I learned, that in a Western concept, that the darkness tends to ties to negative things, void, emptiness, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But in Japanese culture, it's dark. Even darkness is a positive thing. We think that there's something out there.
Yeah.
Like Totoro. Totoro. Maybe something that can help us. So it's always it gives us a positive spin.
But it makes me think of two things. One is like about like you had mentioned something in your book about the paradise of darkness and what can come from darkness and embracing that, like you said with Totoro. Sorry, I know it seems like a big jump, but when you went to the mountains, maybe tell people a little bit about what is Shugendo. Right. And then you went to study with the Yamabushi, and as I understand it, you were talking to the waterfall, and that seems like it was another very profound experience.
Right. But as like I said before, there are three major belief systems: the Shinto, Buddhism, and Shugendo. The Shinto is native in Japan, and Buddhism is a foreign religion. We adapted it many years ago. This is 6th century. Shugendo is native to Japan too. It's a hybrid of Shinto, Buddhism, and other belief systems like Taoism. And they're the practice centering around mountains. The practitioners, Shugendo practitioners, are called Yamabushi, and which literally means surrender of mountains.
Yeah, it's cool.
And so I was curious. What Shugendo was about. I'm still curious. I'm still learning right now too, because Shugendo is very interesting to me, just because I love mountains. Yeah, that's huge. The reason why. But also, it depends on who you're talking to, which region you go to, which history you're talking about. It's a totally different thing. Yeah, and the waterfall was Shinto.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a Shinto shrine. Yeah, but it's okay because that's it's Japanese spirituality. The boundaries are very blurred. But the waterfall, that I wrote in the book was a Shinto shrine, but venerating waterfall. It's called Nachi Fall. There's a big fall, beautiful, 133 meters high. So it's a huge drop.
Wow.
And so there is the Shimena rope on the top. You can see it from the from the bottom, because that's the place where you show respect. And so the first time I went there many years ago, like 10 years ago, I saw the Shimena rope. Shimena rope is a Shinto icon.
Huh.
It's basically, the area is worthy to respect. It's a rope, woven rope, made with straw, and then has the paper, the washi paper, folded paper, just like this, just like that, and attached to it. I saw it and said, how on earth? I mean, of course, a Shinto priest would do, but how did they put up the Shimena rope on the top of it?
Yeah, how?
Yeah, and then I was lucky. A friend of mine had a close connection to the Shinto shrine, and so he negotiated for me to see the Shimenawa changing rituals, which are held twice a year, every year, and that's how I ended up. And we hiked in the mountains, and then I learned from the Shinto priest, 4 or 5 the Shinto priests standing very edge of the waterfall. I mean, if you go a few steps more, you go bye-bye.
Yeah.
But it would just stood there and then change the rope. So I asked them if they feel scary. Are you scared? And then one of the priests, and he says, not at all. And then he said, grateful. And that's very something.
Yeah. It also just feels like when he said he wasn't scared,
Yes.
almost like something that just felt so familiar, or level of comfort, or maybe it's part of just having had the experience.
Yes.
Or, I don't know. I just feel like I think of like the harmonious aspect of it too, like just sort of knowing and being attuned so that you wouldn't fall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's just interesting.
But I mean, unfortunately, that's just not anybody. Everyone can go.
Of course.
But still, but it's still that but that kind of appreciation of nature, the powerful thing.
Yeah.
You can do that anywhere. And I in my book, I made the comparison between the Nazi Fall and Niagara Falls. When I went to the Nazi Fall the first time, I stared at it for an hour. I just stared at it because I was totally moved. It just moved for the powerful nature. But that feeling, it's basically the same I felt when I saw Niagara Falls when I was 17 years old. But Niagara Falls has a Shinto, the Torii Gate, and it has it's a Shinto shrine area. The other one is a tourist spot.
Right.
Okay, one is holy and not that's not
Is it? I mean, as you're talking, I'm thinking about it's like Niagara Falls. You still feel the spirit of the water, even though there's not a gate that you have to pass through. So, are you saying like by putting up or having the Shinto, the gate, or the creation of that, or the Japanese spirituality is like a recognition of it?
Yes.
It's there.
Yes,
anyway.
It's there. Right. Okay, not listeners. A lot of tourists from abroad ask questions. And okay, you venerate Waterfall. And okay, so do you just for the waterfall, or just water, or what do you exactly praying to? It's not just the water. It's not limited to that, because when you started looking at it, that water comes from the mountainsides. Okay, it rain. There's a tree to filter through. That's why there's a beautiful water. And if you started seeing that, you can feel the unknowable connection And also there's something big, something great. And that evokes you the gratitude because you are, a human being as a part of nature.
Yeah.
And that nourishing a sense of belongingness. But
well, you're talking about that, and it's an experience and a recognition and an appreciation, or as you were saying, gratitude, and a feeling of humility and being a part of something bigger,
yes.
which feels like it's such a most meaningful point that we all humans, we all need.
Yes, and I think that's where it comes down to. I can talk about only just Japan things, but the core.
Yeah,
it's not really Japan thing. It just
right.
It's universal.
It's universal, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think that's why your book has such an incredible appeal, because you read it and you might apply what you're saying about Japan to something about your own experience, or something that feels like kind of very universal, that's very impactful in that way. The other thing too, we didn't really touch upon it as much, but like the way in which the natural world is so incredibly like prominent and like connected, and people really have a deep appreciation for nature in a way that I think is much more prominent here or powerful here than in other places. Do you think that's true? Like the seasons?
I think so. Yeah, seasons, definitely. The Japanese, the tradition and the culture are closely tied to seasons.
Yeah.
Kimono, for example. Customary rules, most of them are tied into the seasons.
Interesting.
Because we know that, like, there's the greeting. We call it, we say Itadakimasu every time we eat. And
what is that?
Yeah, Itadakimasu in English literally means humbly accept. I humbly accept. So grammatically, the subject is missing. You fill the blank. So, so you have, say, I don't know, banana, okay, in the morning or whatever, and then say itadakimasu. And I humbly accept banana. Okay, that's great, but it's more than that. The banana is bought by your mother. Your mom went to the grocery store, picked the best ones for you. Or, somebody, or of course, people grew that banana. In order to grow that, you need the sun, you need the rain, you need a good soil. I mean, if you start seeing that, the lens, seeing these things that way, there's connection. There's a web of connections. It's banana, but it's much bigger than that. Yeah. So yes, that is basically that's like examples of the Japanese spirit. You can find Japanese spirituality even the words we speak. That's the great example.
It's beautiful, yeah.
So it's a reminder. So it's basically the Japanese spirituality is hiding in plain sight.
There's two questions I want to make sure that I do ask you. One is about the Itako, and the other is about Masakado. I have to ask you about those two things.
Okay.
But the thing that was really fascinating to me about the Itako, is that my pronunciation?
Yes.
The shamaness who basically spoke to you or channeled your mom after she passed, and your experience of that. Like, how was that for you? I mean, that way, and so that experience is fascinating to me. And then it makes me think of like, if we do live in this world, and I really think we do, where there is spirit embedded and it's everywhere, and it's a world of presence in this way, that like how was she able to experience that and your experience of it? And then have you had dreams about your mom since then, or experiences of her presence in a way, or even your dad?
First, I went to meet Itako. Now today, I think she's 94 years old.
Wow.
Yeah, but when I met her, I was 90. 90
only 90.
Only 90. You get young, right? And I was curious because as a folklorist, because the Itako tradition is a dying tradition.
Really?
She is the last traditional Itako. So when she passes away, that tradition's gonna just die with her, because that's the Itako is, it's a shamaness, totally blind shamaness. So her name is the Take Nakamura, and Take-san. I call her Take-san, not Ms. Nakamura, just Take-san. And she lost her sight when she was very little, and it was very common. So if the child is a girl, she would become Itako counselor. Oh. And if the child was a boy, and it becomes masseuse. Wow. And it was to make a living. Yeah. And but to become Itako, you had to become a disciple of another Itako who was also blind. And that really blew my mind, because I can see everything. I'm relying on my sight. So the total blind person teaching something to another blind girl, and that's really hard. And then there's a lot of trainings, like Waterfall. Go to walk into the mountainside. Must be very scary. You can see on the feet, but it's just every day. Waterfall, that kind of thing, or chant, the memorizing all the chanting. And so the talking to the dead, but just only a part of it. But today it is a modern era, and her main job, I guess, is talking to the dead spirits. Yeah. And so I was curious, of course. And then so I went there with a local who was also a folklorist, and then asked her to talk to my mother. And what I learned from that was that so that's okay. The concept of hanshin hangi comes into play. And it's okay to be a gray zone. Yeah. And it's not the question of belief or disbelief, or the real or unreal, because you cannot answer. So what I learned from her, meeting her, was that it's, I know, my mother or my parents are gone, but it's okay to think maybe they are there somewhere.
When she spoke to you, did you feel your mother? Did it feel like your mother?
No. Okay. It's her. It's just more like talking to a grandma. Yeah, it's a grandma. And then also the professional counselor. I felt like that. But her talking, as my mother, brought me all the memories that slumbered deep in my mind. Wow. And especially in the positive ones.
Wow, really? Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, positive. It's easy to just remember the negative ones, painful ones. You know what I mean? Because it's a daughter. It's a daughter. Not like abusive or anything. It's just, it's just my daughter. But there are the good stuff. And
so something happened in that interaction where it evoked these memories.
Yes, and I truly appreciate that. And then also when the Itako was the talking, but basically she just saying, my mother saying, live fully. I am there always. Live fully. Enjoy your life. And that's all I care. And of course, it was part of my book too. So I interviewed her. So my first question was, so what's the word of the dead, looks like, right? Yeah. She just basically laughed.
She just laughed?
Laughed and said, I don't know. I'm not dead yet. I was like, oh, okay. And some people just go there and then try to kind of, debunk, but But if you started, to seeing those things in a question of belief or a truth or or lie or real or unreal or belief or don't believe, and you're not going to get that kind of a healing answer.
Right. Well, and it seems like she's whatever she's channeling or saying is some type of wisdom. She's channeling wisdom,
Yes.
and that's opening you up to some kind of your past experience or your relationship with your mom. So it's coming up,
Yes.
whether it's true or not or whatever it is.
Yes.
And that there's really a meaning to that.
Yes.
It means it's important. So what about this Masakado? Because that seems like a guy that died like 1,000 years ago.
Masakado has the many shrines and rituals.
Yeah.
And the stone memorials, and there are many. He's and he's one of the most popular, and I think just most beloved.
Beloved.
Yes. In
yes,
Tokyo.
You said in your book, he has anger for us.
Yes.
So I really wanted to understand more about that.
So for the details, I'd like to I wrote in a book and everything, but he was a human being. He was samurai warrior.
Yeah.
In thousand years ago.
Yeah.
And he seemed like he was a very charismatic person. He went head to head emperor, because emperor was the top. How dare you to go against the emperor? But he was a charismatic person, and he organized the people, and he went to head. But he lost the war. He got captured. He got beheaded in Kyoto, right next to the riverbank, right next to Pontocho. Right today is a famous the restaurant in Izakaya. All the tourists go. Anyway, he got executed. That's the history.
Yeah.
But he's more famous in terms of the story after that. He wasn't quite dead. His head was angry. And he said, I would unite my body, and I would come back again. And I would come back, and then I would fight again. His head flew, according to legend.
Yeah.
He flew, and then he landed a spot in Tokyo. Today is just the center of Tokyo, near the Tokyo station, near the Imperial Palace.
Yeah.
The Tokyo. Every time people try to remove it, something bad happened.
Yeah.
But his anger, it's not his anger. It's not at us. He's not angry at us. He's angry for us. That's my interpretation, though.
Mm-hmm.
But the anger doesn't disappear.
Mm-hmm.
It's just there.
Yeah.
So we interpret it when bad things happen. It's like, oh, Masakado. The story of Masakado is angry, and that is why we got the earthquakes, or accidents, or the kind of thing. That's how the people interpreted. It's like, that was Masakado, must be angry. So we got to do something, and do just the rituals. Kind of say, oh, please, please, to calm down or appease the souls, kind of things. But but we love him. It's just because, it's just anger is part of our life.
Yeah. When was it? Like a couple years ago, or more recent?
A couple years ago.
That you were speaking in New York City at the anime conference, and
Anime NYC.
Anime NYC, and you were going to talk about spirituality and you're like, no one's going to come. And then you had 400 people. It was like 400 people, right?
Yes,
it kept coming through.
Yeah, and just we had to keep the door open so that the people could hear.
Yeah.
It's just too many to go in. It's just now at a certain point that it's kind of dangerous. So, but it was fascinating because all the people are just cosplaying, and then in different anime. But yes, I'd like to say that the Japanese spirituality is a key to understanding everything people love about craftsmanship, cleanness, the anime, and even the pop culture, like anime and manga. Everything, the words we speak, food, I mean, everything.
Wow.
So, yeah, so because it's Anime NYC, I decided to talk about Japanese spirituality. You can easily find Japanese spirituality in your favorite anime, even though that they don't talk about spirituality per se. But you can find spiritual icons everywhere, like Shinto shrine, gate, for example. The Tori gate, the two pillars, and then the two bars on the top. If you see that gate, that's a Shinto shrine.
Yeah.
So that the anime, the Jik Aksu, the Gundam anime, that setting is far future, space colony. Okay, but in that anime, there's a still Shinto shrine. so the Japanese people can even imagine not to have a Shinto shrine or holy spot in a far space colony in the far future.
Yeah.
So and in Totoro, and another thing is just they're not talking about the spirituality, but helper is everywhere. Even in a dark place or that place.
The helper is everywhere in the dark place.
Yeah.
It's like it makes me think of like the guardian angel, right? It's like
it's the same idea. It's the same idea. Same idea. It's even monsters.
So when you say even monsters, the yokai,
Yes.
right? So does that mean monster
yokai.
literally, or what?
Yokai are yokai.
Oh, okay. There's no
Yeah,
translation.
yokai, no translation.
Okay.
My husband and I wrote a book called Yokai Attack in 2008. Until we published the book that the yokai had been translated as monster, demon, ghouls, that kind of stuff. But if you translate in English, and then the meaning gets lost in translation, and yokai are yokai. So simply put, the yokai are characters on Japanese folklore, and then also
And spirits.
Yes, spirits. It's a characterization of an unexplainable thing or natural phenomena. So, like for example, and sometimes we get rain even the sun comes out. That kind of strange, strange phenomena, but it happens. So that that the people in old times, just like they call it fox wedding, because in Japanese folklore, the foxes are the trickster animals. So they are probably having a wedding. And then that is why we have such as, the kind of strange weather. And that's yokai phenomena. It's a characterization of natural phenomena. That's yokai is. So in fact, sometimes I break, kids' heart. Whenever I say it's like yokai and not something that you see, because they want to see, right?
Yeah.
But traditionally, yokai are not things that you see. It's a characterization of something, phenomenon or natural phenomena or unexplainable things. I will give you a perfect example. Cookie Monster. Cookie Monster. I always use a Cookie Monster. If the Cookie Monster is yokai, and of course, the simple answer is that it's not because it's a copyrighted character for the Sesame Street, but just put that on the side. But if the Cookie Monster is the name, in big C and big M, Cookie Monster. I am Cookie Monster, like Hiroko Yoda. Okay, and he wouldn't be a yokai. He's a Cookie Monster. But if that Cookie Monster we know is a small c cookie, small monster, he could be a yokai.
Okay.
Yeah, because maybe he's a characterization of unexplainable things. Cookie mysteriously disappeared from a jar when you were not looking at it, and that's global. Okay,
That is
because cookies
global.
are everywhere. So that's yokai.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's cool. Like in all of the experiences or trainings that you've had, what has been the most kind of meaningful or like mysterious?
The things I didn't totally, unexpected was that writing that book ended up another form of healing.
Yeah.
That's something that I never expected. And because I wouldn't lie to you that I cried a lot. I cried a lot every time I sit down on a computer because I had to, go through over and over, the really difficult times, like my mother's funeral, my father's, the kind of very end. I had to go through because I had to write. But then, a year and a half later, and I started noticing myself that, when you write something, you have to write down every details, right? So that reader can picture it. Readers can understand. So through that process, I started finding myself, I putting myself in my mother's shoe. That's healing.
Wow.
That's healing. And of course, I respect, my, hurt feeling. That's a real, when I was young and I got hurt. But when I started putting myself in her shoe, or when I put what she said in a quote, and then I thought what she meant was this way, but maybe what she meant was that. That's healing.
It's huge.
And I think that was one of the biggest, unexpected thing in the entire, in the entire process.
Yeah. No, that's incredible. That's really beautiful. That's such a gift.
Yes.
My last other question that I'm just so curious. You don't have to. You could just say it in one sentence. So, okay, but what's your favorite anime? Like, what's your favorite?
My favorite anime?
Yeah.
Oh, right now I'm watching a Jujutsu Kaisen. Yeah, well, okay, I have an audio book too.
Okay.
And I recorded myself. First I was, I told, no, I'm not native. I can't do this. But the people told me, like, well, it's your book. It's a book. And it's like, okay, well, yeah, I guess, I think I should because it has a lot of Japanese words. But I was very worried that not only, that English is not my native language, the pronunciation, but also it's very personal. And I didn't want to break down. Okay. And so people, all the people are so nice. It's like, okay, you can take your time. But well, yeah, which I did. But also at the same time, I had to work as pro because, editors are waiting for me. So, we had publishing date. So I brought really tiny, cute Gojo, the character from Jujutsu Kaisen. And then I put it in front of it. And he was basically, just sitting like this and look up and see my face. Every time I felt tear, I just looked at him.
Oh.
Jujutsu Kaisen. Yeah, that's my favorite.
Oh, that's great.
Right now,
that's great.
Jujutsu Kaisen.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed this episode and you think someone else might too, please rate the show and share it with a friend. We'd also love to hear your thoughts. Please follow us and leave us a comment on Instagram @WonderstruckPod and let us know what resonated with you. Wonderstruck is produced by Nastasia Getchim at Striking Wonder Productions with the support from the team at Bailey Newman. Special thanks to Brian O'Kelly, Eliana Eleftheru, and Travis Reese, and Josh Wilcox. And remember, stay open to the wonder in your life.